Suddenly, I heard a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door.
The 1994 Miramax film The Crow has always been one of my favorites. The movie's dark atmosphere, along with a great soundtrack, is a draw to any alternative rock fan or metal fan. The movie was such an inspiration that it influenced other venues of entertainment in the 90s. If you're a wrestling fan, you now know where Sting got his iconic look. The Crow has a great cast consisting of Ernie Hudson, John Polito, David Patrick Kelly, Tony Todd, Michael Wincott, and of course Brandon Lee as the film's main character, Eric Draven. The story starts off on Devil's Night, October 30th. The police are investigating a homicide in an apartment building. The victim is Eric Draven, who was shot and thrown out a window while his fiancée Shelley is brutally beaten and raped, and eventually dies in a hospital due to her injuries. The investigating detective is Detective Albright, who is played by Ernie Hudson. He stays with Shelley throughout her final hours and becomes a surrogate parent to the couple's friend Sarah. A year has passed, and a crow, a transporter of souls to the spirit world, has brought Eric back to take revenge on those who have caused he and Shelley's death. Eric wakes up from his grave and slowly makes his way to the apartment that he and Shelley once lived in. There, he finds some clothes and makeup, giving him the iconic crow look that we are all used to. From there, he sets out to find those who wronged him. In the film, I think this scene is probably one of the most iconic scenes in the film in general. And there are many reasons behind this. First, the scene is shot with The Cure's Burn from the Crow soundtrack, which is an awesome tune. Second, this is where Eric sheds his mortal face and sense and puts his Redeemer face on, or mask. In this sense, it's the makeup of the Crow. And lastly, this unfortunately was Brandon Lee's last film. Reason being, he was accidentally shot by Michael Massey, who played Funboy in the movie. A previous scene using the same gun that Massey had called for inert dummy cartridges, or blanks, fitted with bullets, but there was no primer or powder loaded to them. But for close-up scenes, that revolver was clearly visible from the front and did not require the gun to actually be fired. Dummy cartridges provided a more realistic appearance than blank rounds, which had no bullet. Instead of purchasing commercial dummy cartridges, the film's prop crew, hampered by time constraints, created their own, pulling the bullets from live rounds, dumping the powder charge, then reinserting the bullets. However, unknowingly, they left live primer in a place at the rear of the cartridge. At some point during the filming, the revolver was apparently discharged at one of these improperly deactivated cartridges in the chamber, setting off the primer with enough force to drive the bullet partway through the barrel, where it became stuck, a condition known as squib load. The prop crew either failed to notice this or failed to recognize the significance of this issue. In the fatal scene, which called for the revolver to be actually fired at Brandon from a distance of 12 to 15 feet, the dummy cartridges were exchanged for blank rounds, which feature a live powder charge and primer, but no bullet as explained earlier, thus allowing it to be fired and making the actual sound of a gunshot but no projectile. As the production company had set the firearms specialist home early, responsibility for guns was given to the prop assistant, who was not aware of the rule for checking all firearms before and after any handling. Therefore, the barrel wasn't checked for obstructions when it came time to load with the blank rounds. Since the bullet from the dummy round was already trapped in the barrel as previously stated before, this caused the .44 Magnum that was shot by Massey to fire a projectile that actually hit Brendan in the abdomen. Brendan was rushed to the hospital and was in surgery for 6 hours, but unfortunately they could not stop the bleeding and he eventually died from this accident. And this was something Michael Massey had to live with for the rest of his life, knowing he accidentally killed a co-star. This all brings me to my third point of this scene. Now, Brandon had already passed when the scene was shot. Production was halted and they were unsure if they were going to continue the feature. However, they decided to do so and dedicate the movie to him and his future wife. Now, most of the scene in here is shot with a stunt double, or body double. Bren's face is actually put on for the makeup and also for when he's falling from the window. His face was digitally put on via CGI. Now, this comes into another trivia fact, whereas this movie was originally supposed to be distributed by Paramount, but when Brandon had passed, they decided not to do so. So eventually it was picked up by Miramax, who eventually released the movie. Upon leaving his apartment, Eric then meets up with one of the men that killed him and Shelley, Tintin. This scene is shot beautifully by director Alex Prohass, as it shows Eric tracking Tintin via the crow and running across rooftops to the song Dead Souls by 9 Inch Nails. Eventually, it shows him falling into trash from the rooftop before he confronts Tintin. After disposing of Tintin, Eric then pays a visit to Gideon, a pawnbroker that Tintin sold Shelley's engagement ring to. After interrogating him and eventually blowing up his pawn shop, Eric then sees Detective Albright, who doesn't recognize him at first. But Eric has a conversation with him and eventually makes his way to Funboy's place. Now, I know I say this a lot throughout this review, but the Funboy scene is another iconic scene. Visually, Eric slips into the apartment window while Funboy is there with Darla, Sarah's mom, who is a heroin addict, as well as Funboy being a heroin addict. He slips in, creeps up while Gotham Blues is played in the background, and eventually shows an iconic pose of his head underneath a light bulb, all while the riff of the song is going on. It's really, really great, and this review does not do it justice, so I recommend watching the movie just for this scene alone because it's awesome. After making Funboy shoot himself, Eric then turns his attention to Sarah's mom, Darla, where he makes the heroine leave her body and removes her addiction, sending her back to Sarah and hopefully rebuilding a relationship between the two. Eric then turns his attention back to Funboy. He eventually kills, leaving his trademark crow symbol, and leaves the building on his way to get T-Bird. The T-Bird death scene is another nicely shot part of the movie, with Eric abducting him and eventually going on a chase with the cars and Skank far behind, along with T-Bird eventually being taped to his car with explosives and reciting Paradise Lost as he realizes who Eric is. This is nicely done, and the icing on the cake was a shot of the crow symbol being lit on fire after the explosion. Beautifully done, and again, this does not do it justice, please just check it out. Eric then goes to the hideout of Top Dollar, who was guarding Skank. There, Top Dollar and his henchmen then fight Eric in a firefight with guns blazing above a metal concert that's happening below. This is another great scene, with Brandon Lee showing off his martial arts skills, as well as his promise for being an action star. This carries on to eventually where Eric and Top Dollar have a showdown after he disposes of Skank. There eventually he would defeat Top Dollar and find peace, with Shelley coming and calling him back to the afterlife. I could go on forever talking about this movie and make this video maybe an hour long just with me breaking down every scene, but I don't want to do that. I want you to experience the movie with some detail and some context from this video, but giving you the urge to go watch it, and I hope you really do. The Crow was shot on a $23 million budget and was a box office hit, hitting $94 million that year in 1994. James O'Barr, the creator of the Crow series comic book, thought the movie was a little too dark for American audience and was so surprised of the success it garnered after it was shot and released. He actually said that he liked the film, which is the highest compliment he can give as a source material is giving to this movie. Now, The Crow did spawn other sequels such as Crow 2, 3, and 4, and they're not as great as the first one, and they get seemingly worse as you go through them. They also spawned a Crow TV series with Mark Dacascos, which is also not good. Now, there have been talks about a Crow remake being made in the future, with Jason Momoa as possibly playing Eric Draven, but that kind of fell by the wayside as Jason Momoa left the project due to continuously changing directors. So we don't know if it's going to happen or not. In my opinion, hopefully it doesn't, because I think the original is the best and stands the test of time. The only unfortunate thing about the movie is the fact that Brandon Lee could not actually gaze upon the success of the film and I think he would have probably been one of the biggest action stars of the 90s, if not beyond. As we know, he was probably scheduled to be the next Johnny Cage in the Mortal Kombat movie, but unfortunately due to his untimely death, he was recast. And with that, check out The Crow. And with that, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.